The need for security is at an all-time high, so a lot of people are flocking to the security field. So my mission is basically to provide better guards, better management, and guards who actually get the appropriate training that they need, because people just go, they take the course, they get thrown to a site, they don't know how to handle themselves, right? So I'm personally vested in who I hire to make sure that they're properly trained. If upon hire they're not properly trained, but they're already certified, I take it a step further and mentor them through the process to get them to where I need them to be. So I'm set out on a mission to at least change the security industry one guard, one client at a time. My name is Brandon, formerly known in the security industry as Mr. B. I am the sole owner of Mid-Hudson Security Consultants and Mr. B Security Training Center. We are a state licensed agency, regulated agency out of Newburgh, New York. We provide armed security guard services, primarily unarmed security guard services, as well as security assessments. And then the training side of it, me being the only instructor, I also train security guards. So anyone who's looking to start somewhere in security, they come to me. That's the right step to do. So that's what I do.
First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I look forward to this conversation because you are the first security company on on the podcast. I've had some, like I mentioned before we started filming, somebody that had security training. He was, as you heard before, he started doing what he was doing. But I'm intrigued by your profession. I think that it's a very unique profession. It's a very you see it all over. You see armed security all over the place, but the behind the scenes of what that actually looks like, and the licensing and the practice. What that actually looks like is a very unique industry. So I'm looking forward to hearing about it. So tell me how you got involved. Like, where does Mr. B come from? Obviously your name, but I was saying, like, where does Mr. B come from into security? How do you go to school and decide one day I want to be own a security company, or what?
So to get involved in security, first of all, you have to be qualified. You have to basically, as a security agency owner, let's call it, you have to take a test. Then you have to apply to New York State with your resume for them to decide if they're going to license you to be able to operate in New York State. So as it relates to my own personal history, I have extensive experience, and I can just go off on a tangent with everything that I've done. But to just keep it short and simple, I've been in the security industry for a very long time. I bounced around from companies by choice to gain enough experience to open my own outfit, which I have now. It's doing very good, and that's basically what I've done in the past, as well as emergency services, EMS. I was a critical care EMT for a long time. I've seen a lot, and I also did teaching. So that's where Mr. B comes in, the school side of it. I do a lot of security guard training because right? So if you think about what's going on in the world right now, we're in a very dangerous spot right now. If you think culturally or politically, blah, 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 whatever. But the need for security is at an all-time high, so a lot of people are flocking to the security field. So there's job security in it, but the way I look at it as a mission. My mission is basically to provide better guards, better management, and guards who actually get the appropriate training that they need, because a lot of stuff that that I'm seeing right now is people just go, they take the course, they get thrown to a site, they don't know how to handle themselves, right? So I'm personally vested in who I hire to make sure that they're properly trained, and if upon hire they're not properly trained, but they're already certified, I take it a step further and mentor them through the process to get them to where I need them to be. Because the way I look at it is we can't compromise on safety and security in this day and age. But primarily for us, if we speak about staffing, we do a lot of armed all throughout New York State, with a majority of it being houses of worship, apartment buildings, schools, things like that. So soft target locations that are, could be easily attacked and things like that. That's what we deal with.
A lot of things that I want to piggyback on here, because I find your industry very interesting. we'll kind of work our way backwards. The last thing you said, soft target locations. Can you define what that actually is? Like, what's a soft target? I'm assuming that there's a hard target, and I'm just curious what that is.
So if we think about what a soft target is, a soft target location is a location that is soft. They don't have security controls in place, such as having security guards staffed at a site. They have poor access control where anyone can just walk in. Access control meaning obviously controlling access, doors, badge readers, cameras, all along those lines. So if we circle back to what a soft target is, it could be something so simple as a shopping mall who does not have security guards, or a shopping mall that has just unarmed security guards, right? If you think of just regular mall cops type of thing, where if somebody wants to do harm to a facility, basically the FBI says that people scope out the facility first before they come back to commit, any type of harm and things. And I hate to be so doom and gloom, but it's a line of work that we're in.
Hmm.
So when I tell people, they're like, "Oh my God!" Da, da, da. But us being professionals, we know what needs to be done. So schools, houses of worship, um, spaces open for public gatherings, festivals, those are all considered soft targets. Now, if we want to talk about hard targets, right, you have to do a thing called target hardening, which means you have to take steps to mitigate any potential threat that may happen, whether it's an active shooter or somebody, a mass stabber, things like that, right? You have to take steps to impede them or slow them down from them committing their acts of aggression.
What would some of those steps look like for a hard target?
So to target harden, to get to that step, there's various things that have to happen, right? So for us, anytime that we take on a contract, what I do is I include a physical security assessment, a vulnerability assessment, meaning, first of all, I'm not going to put my people into any type of environment without me having some general sense of their security posture. So what I do is I come in, and I've done a lot of these assessments for big companies. I'm not going to mention because I'm still under contract, but right. So what has to happen is I have to come in. I approach a facility like an attacker. I mean, I'm not going there to scare anyone, but I don't. I do an unannounced visit
Hmm.
just to get a general feel. Like, do they have security? Do they have cameras? Is anybody paying attention? And things like that. And then I go inside the facility and see if I'm challenged or not. Right? And most of these places out here, they don't even challenge you. So you think of, right, if you think of some of the active shooter type of situations in, let's call it corporate parks, plazas, malls, things like that. If we speak to the statistics, these people were basically let in. They were from the inside, right? So the FBI compiles data of active shooter occurrences that have happened in the last 20 years. And it's data that I continue to monitor because I have to incorporate it into because I also do active shooter training for a lot of schools in New York City,
Hmm.
also under contract for that. But I have to keep the statistics updated because there are some trends. But not to go off on a tangent, which I tend to do a
I
lot
kind of
because
like these tangents, to be honest, because I just find, again, I said this 5 times already, but I just find your line of work very interesting because I don't know. I think it's a hot topic if you want to call it that. I think that in this world of the NRA and taking away guns, adding guns, we become so divided. Um, but you're in this weird gray area where it's like you want to protect people, but then one side of and I'm not here to get political or anything like that, but one side is saying take away the guns, and the other side is saying keep the guns, but then also at the same time you're saying let's add security to protect people regardless, and it's a very unique position that you're in. So I think it's very interesting. Plus, you're also kind of in the hot topic of danger.
yeah.
So, like, to be honest, I kind of find that kind of cool. I think part of the reason I admire your line of work so much is the fact that while I know it's very much not the same thing, but I'm a hunter, and in hunting, one of the things that becomes very apparent is if you're untrained, that in those moments of adrenaline, that lack of training comes out, and you only revert back to your level of training. So, for example, you think that you're going to be this macho. Oh man, there's this huge deer that comes out. Your adrenaline starts pumping. You start. They call it buck fever. You start. You start shaking. You start. Like all this stuff. And if you're not well trained, you are going to screw that opportunity up very much. And it all goes back to constant training. And I know that you're very similar. And obviously, the stakes are very different in our lines of work. Oh no, what I'm talking about here, but it reverts back to training. I think that a lot of people, even that have firearms, say, I'm going to, I'll just step up in that moment and I'll just be the hero." And without the training, you could very much screw things up. So I think that I admire what you guys do.
Yep. No,
That's my rant.
no, definitely. That's you're spot on, right? So, like I said, I'm an instructor. I train armed security, unarmed security, law enforcement, and what I notice with the civilians, not even well. First of all, a security guard is a civilian, yes, but we're kind of proxy law enforcement, let's say, but we're not law enforcement, which I make clear to everyone. But right, if you think of the level, right, to get a gun in the state of New York, the training is very minimum. Even to become an armed security guard, the training is very minimum. I hope the state doesn't watch this and decides to yell at me for saying that, but it is what it is, right? So I'm big on training, very big, very strict on training. And what I notice, if we think about people who come for firearms training, these people think that going to the shooting range, shooting stationary at a target, at a pod, is what's going to happen in the real life. Now, to touch on what you were saying, when they get into a situation where they may have to use deadly physical force because they can't retreat, what's going to happen is their fingers are basically going to turn into jelly. Like you said, they're going to revert back to whatever they believe that they know, but without the training and the exposure, it's like you just can't get a license, a permit, anything to carry a firearm and stop your training just because you got the permit. You have to go out, you have to consistently train, you have to train in different types of environments, different scenarios, shoot, don't shoot, because you have to build up that muscle memory and that confidence to be able to protect yourself and others. And it's the same thing with armed security guards. I have armed security guards who come in because they want a job, and I put them up against the tests because we have simulators and things like this and everything. And it's like, they're missing, to be honest. They're just completely missing a target. And basically each round that you fire is what I tell people is $1 million lawsuit that I'm responsible. Actually, let me say this, that not only am I responsible for, you as a security guard are also responsible. So if you misplace a round, you're going to jail or getting sued. So that's why I'm very, very big on training, because people come in, they think, like you said, they're big, macho, da 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 da, and when you add artificial stress, let's call it, that's where you see where the deficiencies are, and that's where you build on people to build them up to where they should be to be an actual protector.
Yeah, it's very, very, very interesting. And I'm curious your opinion on this. This is, I don't know, I might toe the line of politics a little here and there, but I'm curious on the whole lawsuit aspect of things, where we've created a world, at least in New York, I don't know, it's different in other states, but like we've created a world where like I think that people are almost hesitant to help because they're concerned about what, like the repercussions of what that might look like. Do you think that that's the right kind of culture? Do you think that that's the wrong kind of culture? Do you think that it just, then people are just unprepared, and then maybe they should just be more prepared and they wouldn't have to worry about then, taking a missed shot? Or I'm curious your opinion on that.
So basically, my opinion on individuals not engaging to try to mitigate the outcome of some type of, let's call it a massacre or things like that, if we think of firearms, is okay, we live in a state where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. People are right now used to walking on eggshells, so they don't even want to do, like you said, they don't even want to do anything because they're scared of the outcome. Now, here's my take, and this is what I tell everyone in training. If you have a firearm and you're licensed to carry your firearm and you're trained and you're at a location where somebody's shooting the place up, Are you telling me that you're not going to engage that person to at least push back on them or slow them down, impede them until law enforcement arrives, right? So the national statistics is once the first 911 call is placed, okay, let's say it takes 30 seconds for them to process something on 911, get the units rolling. But depending on where you live in the country, it's a 3 to 11-minute response time till the police get there. That's a long time for somebody to do harm or whatever they intend to do. So it's like if you have somebody on site, they're trained with the firearm, they need to push back on the threat. And that is my personal public opinion. But the flip side of the coin is, like I said earlier, if you have a gun, you don't train with it, and you pull it out and you hit a target that's not intended or you hurt yourself, you're not helpful to anyone.
The blunt truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does training look like? What would you recommend for even a civilian or even armed security? Like what does training look like to get to that level of confidence?
Repeat training. So my training consists of a lot of people say it's high intensity because it is, because the world is unforgiving,
Mm.
it's unpredictable, and you need to be prepared as much as you can for any type of scenario. So if we think of the armed security training that I do to bring people up to where they need to be, it consists of coming to the office, to our training center, putting them up against a shoot, don't shoot simulator, which basically projects an image on the wall. The laser firearms that we have projects a laser, the computer picks it up, it shows you where the point of impact was on the target. But in that computer system, I could fully control what happens, right? It's called branching scenes, where you have an armed guard, you put him there, you say, hey, look, this is the iteration or what we're going to do in this stage. You are to identify any threats, which we call positive identification in the industry, where you look at something and you decide, okay, what's in their hands? Are they a threat? Is it they have a knife? Do they have a gun in their hands? So what has to happen within milliseconds really is an armed security guard has to judge whether somebody is a threat or not and take proper action to mitigate it. So on this simulator that I'm talking about, in a controlled environment, I can control what happens, whether, let's call it the threat on the screen pulls out a gun, pulls out a knife, or the threat on the scene on the screen decides to walk away. But there's been situations where people, let me say, first of all, they don't work for us, but I'm going to tell you the situation where they come there to the simulator just to see what it's like, and they shoot somebody on the screen, not in real life, they shoot somebody on the simulator where the deadly physical force was not authorized, right? Itchy trigger finger, they call it, or something like that. Or they just drew from the holster and shot at the image when they weren't supposed to. So those are my main issues with training, why I'm so hard, and other people call it very intense. It is intense. So I just feel like training is where it's at right now, because like I said, it's a dangerous world and you don't want to be underprepared.
Yeah. Just I like what you said just on the topic of like the world is unforgiving, and one mistake, like 1 millisecond of a decision or lack of decision can mean $1 million lawsuit or or whatever a funeral service. In either direction, and lack of deciding is a very very interesting. So I understand why you take your position so strongly, because I think that with any lack thereof would be a disservice to the public. Um, I'm curious now. You mentioned. Let's go back to so many different branches I can go in this because there's so interesting. I'm curious. You mentioned the fact that you do a lot of statistic reading, and you staying up to date on the FBI's like releasing of statistics on either mass shootings or school shootings or things like that. And you talk about you seeing that there are trends within those statistics. Do you feel that there is an increase in trend in these shootings, or does the media overplay it? Not overplay it, but like it just, if that makes sense. The media lives to make to sell. It's their job to sell stories, and I'm not undermining anything in the sense of like people's lives lost or lives lost, right? but I do think that the media can make things look larger than they are, and I'm curious if that's the case here, or do you think that it is increasing? And I'm curious if that is the case, why you think it's increasing.
So as it relates to trends of active shooter situations, um, whether I believe it's increasing or not, I have to go based off of what what the statistics are. The statistics are showing historically to present that the amount of active shooter occurrences are on the rise. That is the facts. Now, if we think about the media, and here's the thing, I don't know if it's because they're catching more wind of it and it's sensational and it wraps into the Second Amendment type of dispute and things like that. So now they overplay it. But the thing that we can't ignore is that these occurrences are happening and they're increasing. But it's definitely catching media coverage. But it is true, it is happening, it is increasing.
Why do you think it's increasing?
I mean, I have so many opinions.
Do you care to publicize those, or are those private opinions?
So if we think about, I'm not going to go too much in politics because we'll be here all day, but some things have changed in the last series of years, let's call it, where, right, if we think about our current state as civilization, culture, things like that, right? People have mental issues, let's call it. People have financial issues, people have marital issues, things like that. And now, when they have outside interference, let's call it, maybe a presidential election, maybe some type of laws that change, maybe some type of they got in trouble with their taxes or something or whatever. Um, they have all this interference coming from the outside that may influence them, maybe, or push them to go over the deep edge. Um, that's what I believe is happening, and it's just that in this day and age, some people think that it's their way or no way,
Mm.
but they don't understand that that's not the part. That's not how things are supposed to work. It's supposed to be a little bit of this side, this side, this side. But people don't see it that way. The next thing you know, they're getting pissed off because either somebody spoke bad about them, how they lived their life, or whatever. And that next thing you know, they want to go shoot up the school.
Mm. Yeah, very interesting. I would agree on that. I think that that as this culture, I don't know where it's come from, but I do find that we have become more my way or the highway. Obviously, human nature. I think I'm going to use the biblical term is always fallen. Of like we have a tendency to do bad ever since Adam and Eve kind of thing. I think that that's why we need God, frankly. But outside of that, so I'm not saying like, oh, people were perfect beforehand and now we're not. You've always had bad tendencies, right? And we always that's why war has always been a thing. That's why hate has always been a thing. Um, I think people like to like look at the past with rose-colored glasses and be like, oh, life was so much better back then. And it really was not. It was just different. People were still dying and people bad things were still happening. But that doesn't that. With that said, I think culture does shift and go through different directions, and there are better times and there are worse times. Um, and it is an interesting time that we are living in now, where I do agree, culture has shifted less towards the uh, group mentality and more towards the individual mentality. And I mean, if I'm a big history buff. If you just look at like the World War II time, the 40s, and the late 30s and 40s, when people were like, "Oh my gosh, America was attacked," the whole nation, every 16-year-old to 30-year-old boy was like, "I'm signing up because it's my duty in my country." I don't know if that would happen today. I think that people are a little too self-absorbed in their own desire, my and me and this. And I don't know. It's a really interesting cultural observation that you said that. I think that it's my way or the highway these days, and I think that that's why people then revert to these extreme measures of potentially taking somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would lead to all these things of like the increase in shooting at houses of worship that you mentioned or schools that you mentioned. Because if we don't agree on the same terms, then it's not a kumbaya anymore. Which again, it never was because that's why we've always had war in history. But it's become increasingly easy or to just accept the fact of like, well, then I'm just gonna remove your idea from the world.
That's basically spot on with what's going on. And it's honestly, it's a lot of younger people. If you look at the statistics,
Hmm. When you say
it's
younger people, what does that look like?
the age bracket. I believe it was 15 to 26, and then it goes up to 47. These are the main groups of people committing.
26 to 47, or in the 40s, you mean?
So basically, just say from teens to late 40s are the ones committing most of these acts. But in recent times, let's say in the last 8 years, that trend is pushing back towards teenage years. So it's just it's unfortunate, but I'm looking for a reason as to why it's happening, and the only thing I can think of is what we just spoke about: people, right? Coping skills. That's it. Coping skills. Younger people don't know how to cope with social differences, right? And they feel like they're not getting the support that they need, or for some reason their algorithms of their social media, whatever they're looking at, is showing them hate the other side all the time, and that's all they see. That's poison. That stuff is poison, right? If you think about in the last 8 years that they've uncovered where there was certain type of targeting done to certain devices to show them specific, and I'm not going off on conspiracy theories or anything like that, but that is factual. So when your phone gets caught in a loop where you're seeing the same stuff day in, day out, you already hate the world, you hate the other side, you have bad coping skills, you don't want to reach out for help because a lot of people don't know that help exists. They don't want to reach out to their parents because they feel that their parents aren't supportive, or, they try to deal with it and cope with it themselves, deal with it themselves. Next thing you know, you hold all that anger inside, and then you just snap and you do something crazy.
So I want to pivot now a little bit more towards the contracts that you're seeing. You mentioned having several different types of contracts. I'm curious if you could elaborate. Obviously, if you NDAs, you can't talk about the specifics, but like, what types of contracts are you holding a lot of right now?
The majority of contracts that we have, the security side of it, is houses of worship, schools, apartment buildings. Right? If we talk about houses of worship,
Armed security in apartment buildings.
oh yeah.
It's foreign to me because there's not many apartment buildings around here. So please
Not
elaborate
only
on that.
that, just apartment buildings, senior apartment buildings where they have armed security. You would be surprised without saying too much, what goes on in some of these places. We're talking seniors, 55 and above, because that's what they categorize it as, selling drugs, selling their body at this age. So yeah, I bullshit you not. So they attract that type of people to the location. You're flabbergasted,
I-
but it's
Just
true.
the whole concept. I mean, I guess things are very different from like the 80s and the 70s and of like gangs and stuff where it was just like a free for all in those places. And I guess now, who's contracting you though? As like, is it the private company that owns the apartments or
So here,
the
here's
landlords?
so here's the thing with who contracts us at the apartment buildings. It could be municipal or it could be privately owned. So we do a little bit of both, right? Some are government ran, some are privately ran. So we're approached by either or to provide them security services, and we only do armed in these verticals, meaning industries that I'm speaking of.
It's fascinating. Um, so I interrupted. You said houses of worship. You said schools. You said apartments, which blow my mind. Is there any other areas that I interrupted before you mentioned?
Yeah, so primarily that's what we do there, but we also do a lot of one-offs like weddings and things like that, corporate functions.
Armed security for these events.
Yeah, honestly, our company focuses primarily on armed because how I feel is the world is crazy, like I said already. What is an unarmed security guard going to do if
Yeah,
somebody walks into a school and starts shooting
yeah,
at the school?
yeah.
Right? So we have to be prepared. But with that comes training behind it, like I said.
Sure.
So
I'm curious the mentality behind the people that are hiring you for their wedding. that are hiring your armed security company for your wedding, what is their thought process in that? Because
So
that's, to be honest with you, I understand the concept. Like, honestly, why not? Like, there's 300 people there. Somebody could do some damage with a gun.
mhm.
But at the same time, I don't know if armed security would have been my first thought. So I'm curious, what is that like? Are these high level celebrities, or are these just regular people that are just hiring armed security?
If we think about how we are approached to provide armed security at weddings, and I'm about to blow your mind with this again, right? So let's just use some examples and hypotheticals, right? Somebody's getting married who has a vengeful ex. That person somehow intercepts the date, the invitation, and they want to go there and cause issues. Typically, you don't have security at weddings,
I would agree. That's why you
let
kind
alone with a gun.
of blowing my mind a little.
So, so these people who contact us, right? We tend to do a lot of high risk stuff. We are probably one of the only security companies in the state of New York who will do high risk stuff. Um, Not to go off a tangent, but we also do a lot of executive protection, protecting VIPs. But for the weddings, that's specifically it. They are afraid that somebody who doesn't like them or somebody they had prior relationship with will come there and mess up their day, right? And secondly, what we do is also guess the checklist because most of these the guest list because most of these locations that the bride and groom book says you're responsible for the door yourself. So they want to focus on their special day. So the next best thing is what? A security guard.
Very interesting. Again, this is why I find your industry so interesting because when I think security, to be honest, and I say this with a genuine heart, not trying to mitigate anything that you do because I acknowledge it's a lot, but like I think a bouncer at a bar sometimes, like, and the fact that it's so much larger. And I genuinely don't mean that in any demeaning way, but I think that that's what most people think of. Oh, a security guard. Oh, the guy that in the front of the school. Typically, 90% of the time, bouncer, guy at the school are all unarmed security. So this whole industry to me, I find so fascinating because I don't know anything about it, to be honest. So I appreciate you opening the doors and sharing about the industry. Do people know that it is armed security at these places, or are you guys quote unquote like undercover?
So we do a mix. We will never send somebody to a site that didn't ask for a gun to be there, right? We run into
Sure.
we run into a situation where guns are frowned upon, and they know that we're primarily armed, and they'll ask me, "Hey, Mr. B, we want you guys, but we know you got guns. We don't want you to bring the guns." And I'm like, "Wait a second. You're expecting me to tell retired police officers, military, armed security guards who have 20-something years of experience leave their gun at home because they want to come work at this wedding? It's just not happening." So what I tell the clients is, which they already know. I mean, it's out there. It's our websites, our social media. People know we do high-risk stuff. We do a lot of armed security. If a situation comes where there's a disagreement about us not being able to carry, the answer is go find someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess my question though is, do the guests know that there is armed security,
Oh,
or
the
is it
guests.
like,
Okay.
or is it more of like, hey, we're just these guys in the background that nobody really knows what you're doing, kind of thing? Like, are you creating a presence there, or are you meant to be more of in the shadows, and if something happens, then you step up?
So the way it works with the requests for, like, if we focus on a wedding, they would contact us. We would mash out the details, armed or unarmed. Just saying they went with armed, I would say, okay, do you want them in traditional security uniform, which is considered a hard approach or hard appearance.
What
Looks
is
like
yeah, okay, thank you.
it looks like police officer uniform, but it just says security. People think twice when they see somebody in a uniform because uniform commands respect and authority. Now, there's another flip side of it. Okay, if you don't want the hard appearance, do you want a soft appearance? Soft appearance meaning polo shirt that just says security. Maybe a blazer or something, right? So you have hard, soft. Then if they want armed security, we have to discuss, okay, we're operating in New York State. Our guards are licensed and trained to carry firearms. They will have a duty belt with the gun on the outside. And then that's where we run into a situation where a client says, well, it doesn't meet the optics of what we're trying to do. And I'm like, optics? You think an active shooter or somebody cares about optics? I mean, are you guys crazy? So what we do is we try to find a happy medium where, okay, they're armed, but they're concealed. We do assignments where there's armed guards, but they're carrying concealed, right? Because we try to meet the optics and not have people worried about, oh my God, there's security guards running around with guns. And this happens all the time, even at schools. Schools don't want the guns on the outside because it doesn't meet the optic. The parents will start to get concerned, or this and that. People question, why do security have guns? Is it so much of a problem here? We shouldn't come here anymore, right? So the optics play into it a lot. So obviously, you know, if we were working at a wedding or something, if it's concealed, nobody would know that we have a firearm.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's the whole, at least in New York State's definition of concealed carry.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for people that want, say they have the CCL concealed carry license? What do you like right now as a firearm for people to carry?
What type of firearm do I like people to carry? Right. So people who are just starting off, and I know any other gun owners or anything like that are probably going to jump on my back what I'm about to say, but somebody who's just starting out needs to stick with the basics and what's simple. I'm allowed to say a brand?
Yeah, please. I'm curious. Yeah.
Right. So this is not a paid endorsement by them or anything. They should pay me though. But I tell everybody this: when you first start out, get yourself a Glock. Glocks are easy to manipulate, take apart, clean, and shoot. Right? Opposed to somebody going out and getting a 1911, which has like 100 different parts. Right? You're just starting off. You need to keep to the basics. A Glock is what people should get. Glock, make sure you send my check for this, okay?
I understand that, but I do love the 1911.
Yeah.
It's a beauty. It is a beauty.
You went the reverse direction.
And that 45 is powerful. I neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah.
But
hey, it's whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I am curious. So now more advanced. Let's talk about what do you like. So now that's somebody that's getting involved just in the beginning. You go with the Glock. Somebody that's not and more advanced. I mean, what do you if your top level security guys came to you and was like, hey, you know, I'm looking at something new. What would you recommend?
Glock.
You'd still stick with it? Really?
It's just I'm a Glock guy, to be honest. So it's I mean, I have other things.
Even over SIG?
SIG? No, I've never owned a SIG, and I they're kind of expensive too to get in the beginning. But I do have some people who first time armed guards, they do have SIGs, full size. That's what they're comfortable and confident with. Me as their employer, I can't go, okay, now I'm going to change what you've been carrying for the last, because now it creates a training lapse, a gap, let's call it, where now they have to learn, if I make it a mandate, it has to be a Glock, they have to relearn it, even though it's you know, so simple. But beginners really need to stick with the basics, Glock. But the flip side of it is really what you're comfortable with, what your budget is. But for me, primarily when I train newbies, it's what's important is how the gun feels in your hand. That is very important.
For somebody that might not have access to the simulation that you were talking about earlier, how would somebody train to feel more comfortable, even with home security? Like I know you offer armed security services for people, but I'm sure you have an extensive amount of experience. Even the concept of home security, if somebody would want to become more well-versed or skilled in protecting their own home, kind of similar to what we were saying before, if you don't practice, you're going to revert to any training or lack of training that you have. So what would you recommend for that?
So what would I recommend to people who want to become security conscious at home? If you got a gun, go out and train with it as much as you can. Because like I said, you don't want to get in a situation where you have to use deadly physical force and you miss, or your fingers turn to jelly. So there's other things that you can actually go out and buy too, if we're sticking on the firearm side of it right now, is you can get, there's a company, actually, they're out here, And again, this is not a paid endorsement. That company's name is Laser Ammo. Laser Ammo offers all their equipment is basically airsoft equipment that's been converted to fire lasers. They have firearms that replicate a Glock, firearms that replicate, whatever, a SIG. And what you can do is you can go out, you can get these training guns, and then they make these interactive targets, let's call it. Actually, that's their actual name, where they pick up on the laser. So you can be at home, whatever, in your bedroom, put the laser target across the room, and go ahead and practice drawing from the holster, establishing point of aim, point of impact, and shooting at a laser, right? So repetition builds better shooters. So this company, Laser Ammo, they make a lot of good stuff. That's where our stuff comes from. Our entire simulator, right? We have the law enforcement stuff, very expensive stuff. But the stuff that I'm telling you about, if somebody wants to just practice drawing from the hip and getting a target acquisition and a positive, PID, positive identification, meaning they identify something as a threat, they can get these little interactive laser targets. I think it's like $200-300, and they could practice at home.
Are you still going out and doing security, or at this point are you all behind the scenes of like managing the company?
So me at this point, what I'm doing is I'm still working in the field, right? The way I look at it is we're a team. But now that's kind of biting me in the ass because I can be part of the team right alongside my people, but who's focusing on the office work, right? So I've noticed that a lot of stuff has gone behind from working in the field. So in recent times, I withdrew myself from the field to be able to focus on administration and running the company the way it should be.
How do you find new clients or new contracts? What does that look like? Is it all word of mouth? Do you do marketing? What does that process look like?
How we find clients, and this is a very interesting thing. We have never done paid advertising in the 8 years that we've been open. Everyone who approaches Mid-Hudson Security Consultants either found us online, it was word of mouth, or a police department had recommended us to them, which we do a lot of. Actually, that's where the apartment buildings we're at now, is because it was police recommendation, because honestly, they don't want to sit on it, so they rather security be there. But that's primarily how we get a majority of our clients, or how we got those clients.
And what is your current spread of location? Like you're based out of, remind me where the actual base of the company is.
So it's in Newburgh, New York, which is Orange County.
Okay, and now do you do the whole state, or how far do you guys spread at the moment, and where are you looking to expand to?
Our sites are situated, let's call it all around our office, right? We go as far as an hour past Albany, all the way down into Long Island, New York City, and then tri-state region, parts of Jersey. So because we're licensed in the state of New York, we can go anywhere that we really want to go. Honestly, what it comes down to is wanting to travel, right? So if we think about out here, I'm also thinking about opening a branch office out here, just because we want to have a footprint in Long Island and then a footprint in New York City. Now, we're still doing work, but we don't have that physical branch office yet.
Are the requirements or legalities different from operating outside of New York City versus inside New York City?
So the legality of the locale of where we're going to operate really doesn't matter, because our license as armed security guards or security guards is the state of New York, right? New York City likes to do their own thing sometimes and add in, oh, you need OSHA for this, you need fire safety director for this, which is true. But your license, just like your pistol, well, don't even get me started on politics with New York City with pistol permits. But let's talk about security. Your security guard license is good for all of New York State. So that's how we do that.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that you offer training. Is that just security training, or do you offer training for like CCLs and things like that as well?
So the training that I offer is the unarmed security guard class, the armed security guard class, the yearly renewals for both. Also, as I said earlier, I was a critical care EMT. I also offer basic life support training, CPR, first aid, AED. It's not stop the bleed, but it's the same exact curriculum where I'm teaching people how to plug holes and stop uh, excessive bleeding, as well as firearms, right? If we think of the concealed carry, I do a lot of that as well, where people come to me, they want to get their first gun, where I say, get a Glock. But, and I teach them. But here's the thing, what I struggle with, right? I'm security. I'm law enforcement. Well, no. Let me take that back for a second. I'm a law enforcement instructor and been teaching police officers for a long time. It's difficult to differentiate the two because civilian side, I have to teach you this. Law enforcement security side, I have to teach you this. Right? So I get in a situation where, why am I teaching a civilian how to do this or do this? They're never going to do that, or they shouldn't know how to do that. Right? There's some other things. I don't want to say too much, but if we think about like shot placement on a threat that's wearing ballistic armor, the average person doesn't know if somebody's failing to stop and they have ballistic armor that you can shoot them in the groin, or you can shoot them where, let's just say you can shoot them where there's no protection, which is usually under the arm. Right? So now you're teaching civilians how to do that stuff. How do we know that these people aren't going to go off the deep end and now Mr. B just spilled the beans to them? So honestly, what I struggle with is trying to differentiate the two between civilians, law enforcement, and security. But I do both sides of it.
Very interesting. You know, I don't envy your position. I admire your position, but I don't envy your position of walking that tight line of people's lives are in your hands, in the sense of when you're out there doing security and the company that you're running with security, and also with the training. You know, lack of training, or can lead to mishaps in the field or at home. And but I do admire the fact that you have the gall to do it, and that somebody's got to do it. And I admire the fact that you're stepping up to do it. So I did want to say that.
So the main purpose why I do what I do is, obviously there's deficiencies in training across the board with security. I'm set out on a mission to change the security industry, one security guard, one client at a time. There are security guards out there who are subpar, who thought it would be a cool job just to become a security guard, and they don't give a shit about the client. They don't care about the company they work for. So they show up, whether they show up late, drunk, high. It doesn't happen with us, but it happened with other major companies where I worked in a position of authority, where that has to change because the world is rapidly changing. So I'm set out on a mission to at least change the security industry one guard, one client at a time, by improving security standards, working with the state to try to change the security curriculum of eligibility, let's talk, as well as annual training, because I feel it's not enough. And that's the current path that I'm on. So up in my local community, a lot of people know that. A lot of people are supportive with that. And what I'm looking to do is to get the message out there to, hey, look, Mr. B is serious. He's serious and he's not going to back down. So, and a lot of people don't like change. They're not receptive to change. But change is what makes us better people. It prepares us for the worst. So that's what I'm set out to do.
We'll wrap it up with this question here, because we never totally kind of covered it. How did you, with that mission in mind, how did you get into this industry? Like, like you mentioned you worked a couple jobs beforehand, but what was the deciding factor that said, I want to work in armed security?
Some contributing factors that led me down this road with this path was, okay, I was working for, and I don't want to say them by name, I was working for major security companies here in the United States as either a lieutenant, which is like field supervisor of supervisors, branch manager, business development manager, and regional sales. in those roles, I was basically completely disregarded, spoken down to. I witnessed managers, branch managers, regional managers cursing out frontline employees, cursing out other managers, supervisors, security guards, treating them like dogs. And it's like, for me, after seeing all that, I'm like, I want to set out to do something different, to try to treat people better. Now, there are some idiots out there working security who need to be yelled at, but you have to treat people humanely and with respect. So what I did is I left those agencies and I started my own security company, which we've been open for the last since 2020, but honestly before that, because we were doing a lot of risk assessments since 2018.
But what was the first security job? What made you sign up as that, however young you were?
Because I thought it would be a cool job.
And you
and
just worked your way up.
and then yeah, it was off to the races thereafter.
That's cool, man.
So
That's great. Well, I appreciate you sharing and opening up and all the things that you shared about. I find it really interesting, and I appreciate, um, again, the work you do and just the insight that you shared today. The last question I'll ask is what I ask every guest at the end of the conversation is, what is one thing that you know now in your career that you wish you knew when you first started out?
one thing that I wish I knew back then when I was first starting out would have been, don't be so nice to people.
Can you elaborate on that?
I have to elaborate because it sounds a little weird. So, right, so even though I set out to try to change the industry, I found myself, instead of being a boss, instead of being a CEO, trying to be part of the crowd. In time, that will come back to bite you in your ass in any job that you do, right? So when I say don't be so nice to people, I really mean don't try to be part of the crowd, because when it's time to start cracking the whip, they will buck back at you, no matter how long they worked for you. So you really have to be a boss, and I wish I knew that in the beginning, because it's kind of hard breaking that pattern of behavior or thought as time goes on.
Very interesting. Well, I appreciate it today. Thank you for your time. It was
Thank you
a
very
pleasure.
much.